I have spoken to you in the past of there being two sides to words. There is the side of the person speaking, and then there's the side of the one listening. And these are never the same view. The one speaking and the one listening almost always hear words in different ways. And the difference between them, or what is lost in translation, is not so much the meaning of those words as the intensity, the passion, the fire. So the person speaking will choose words and then say them, and they mean them to a 10. Because behind those words is a lot of experience and a lot of ideas and passion. So they will say those words to a 10. The one listening will hear them to say maybe a 3 or a 4. So men, when your wife says you don't listen, this is what she means. She means that she is saying something to a 10 and you're listening to a 3 or 4. Even when you can recite back to her what she said, you still don't know the intensity or the reality from which she said it. You tracking? So words are more than just labels to someone's thoughts. Words are portals that we are to crawl into and feel our way forward until we can finally touch the speaker's reality, the depth of their experience. Some people, when they use words, use too many. They're external processors. So they will talk a lot in order to find that one thing that they're really trying to say. Jesus is not that person. Every time Jesus opens his mouth, he knows exactly what he is trying to say. And he never uses more words than he needs to use. Although, in my opinion, he says too little, not too much. I always want to say, what do you mean? What do you mean? Talk more. And he just says it. And on the other side of those words is a certainty, a depth of experience, a reality. That if you could crawl into those words and feel your way forward, you might one day touch just how true what he said actually is. Every time Jesus speaks, lately, this is how I think of his words. These words are those kinds of words. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. This is Jesus talking. He knows exactly what he is trying to say. And he has said it in the shortest possible way. And you will live the rest of your life, as I will, trying to get to the bottom of what he said. So when I heard him say it the first time, I heard a natural law. He says, this is the way that I've created nature. A grain of wheat will fall to the ground. It will lose itself in the soil underneath the audience that's walking on the surface. And all by itself, without anyone telling it what to do, it will automatically die. That is its nature. And when it dies, it does so oblivious to what people walking all over it are thinking. But when it dies, it will release its life into thousands of other seeds. When it dies, it reproduces. If it doesn't die, it remains what it always was, just a seed. That's what I heard the first time. And that meant something. But the more I stayed on it, I started to hear a proverb. It's as if Jesus were saying, there are wise people and there are foolish people. Wise people fall to the ground and die. And when they do, their influence is multiplied. Fools remain what they always were, an individual seed, by themselves, self-contained, self-actualized seed. But one seed and 1,000 others. And it meant more. Then I stayed with it, and I heard something like an invitation. There was a smile on Jesus' face, and behind the smile, he said something like this. Steve, if you could ever find a way to die, your life would be multiplied 1,000 times. Far more influential and powerful than you ever dreamed. But if, Steve, you remain what you are, self-contained, self-aware, self-made, self-expressive individual, then that's what you'll be. Only that. So I want to spend the balance of our time before we take communion talking to you about the tremendous potential of one life, just one life, ordinary life like yours, if it dies. But it's got to die. I can't get away from that phrase. If it dies, what might be possible? But if it doesn't, then it remains pretty much what it is today. The traditional way of understanding what Jesus meant in John chapter 12 goes something like this. Jesus was at the festival of the Passover, and a couple of Greeks came from outside to the festival. Now, Greeks don't really know much about Jewish festivals. They're Gentiles. They don't care what festivals for Jews are. And they showed up in order to see Jesus. So they found Philip, whose name is Greek, by the way, and Philip found the only other disciple with the Greek name, Andrew. And they said to them, "Sir, we would like to see Jesus." And when Jesus heard this, he said to the disciples, the hour has finally come. 5 times previous in the Gospel of John, Jesus said, the hour is not yet come, not yet come, not yet come. But when he heard that the Greeks were looking for him, Jesus said, now the hour has come. And why? Because the Greeks, who represent the world, have finally discovered who the Messiah is. And now that they have come looking for the man inside of the religion, he will be glorified when the whole world exalts him. So the Son of Man will die, fall to the ground and die, and when he dies, his death will give life and salvation to millions of other people all around the world. That is the traditional understanding of this passage. The problem is that I favor the other one. That goes something like this. Jesus was at the festival, a Jewish festival, and he hears that some Greeks have come looking for Jesus, knowing that he is within 6 days of dying. Jesus says, the hour has finally come. The Son of Man will be glorified. How will he do that? Next verse. When a seed falls to the ground and dies, it produces many seeds. So the glory that the Son of Man is going to get is not coming from the Greeks. It's coming from the Father. Because Jesus is never more like the Father than when he sacrifices himself for other people. Let me say that in shorthand. Self-sacrificial love is the nature of God. Herein is love. Not that we loved him, but that he loved us and gave himself for us, a sacrifice for our sins. Self-sacrificial love is the nature, the essence of God's being. Therefore, Jesus is most glorified in the moment when he makes transparent this self-sacrificial love. But let's get it clear. The glory that the Son of Man is going to receive is not coming from the Greeks. It's coming from the Father. And it's not coming when the Greeks elevate him. It's coming when he lays down his life. That's an odd kind of glory. Everywhere in this world, except at the table where the triune God sits. So what Jesus said is, unless you fall to the ground and die, you remain just what you are now. But if you die, your influence will be multiplied exponentially. Only you won't know it. Because you're dead. Most of us want to pretend to die, then stick around for the funeral, so we can hear how noble we were to lay down our life. You can get famous inside the church pretending to have died. And then soon after it, you'll start hearing reports of how you looked or what they thought while you were dying. And those reports will start to inflate a distended view of yourself. So with this in mind, Jesus rolls right into the next verse and says, anyone, not just religious people. This is a principle that is true for everyone who is breathing right now, anywhere in the world, anyone who tries to save his life loses it. It's worth noting that that verb loses is in the present tense. So what Jesus is saying is, anyone who puts himself first is losing his life right now. He just doesn't know it. He thinks that his life is getting bigger because people are watching, they're looking, they're liking on Facebook his profile. So he thinks that himself is getting bigger. He doesn't know that he's actually losing power. He doesn't know this. His chances of reproducing himself in someone else to the nth degree is going down. He doesn't know this. He thinks it's going up because there's more people watching him. What he doesn't realize, he's trading an audience for the potential of influencing a few. He doesn't know this. And so he keeps chasing audiences, likes. But if a person is willing to lose themselves right now, start diminishing their importance. They don't feel this, but their potential to do something tremendous for other people is actually on the rise. This is why a lot of the talk today about legacy makes me nervous. I'm not saying it's all bad, but some of it scares me because a lot of it sounds to me like some older person trying to attend their own funeral before they die. They're trying to project into the audience what they hope people will say of them. No, that sort of is Jesus' point. When you start hoping what people are going to say about you in the future happens, you're already losing your life. You're not gaining it. Your influence is getting smaller. There's just more watchers, bigger audience. So I hear Jesus giving us a general principle in life because he's speaking to Greeks. Greeks do not think of Jesus' death as an atonement. They don't think of it as a ransom for sinners. Those are Jewish words. Greeks understand a life principle. When something dies, it has the potential to reproduce itself. If it refuses to die, it's true of nature, it's true of every living organism, even organizations. If it refuses to die, its power is diminished. Said differently, my potential to influence someone is commensurate to my ability to die. Think about the tremendous potential your life can have if you die. Wow. Wow. When Jesus speaks of dying, of course, he speaks of his physical death. This is plain. But when he speaks of us dying, he speaks of something else, like self-interest, my rights, my audience. He seems to say that most of us were born in this world worried mostly about ourselves. We provide for ourselves. We look out for our rights, not someone else's, not first. We dream for our future, not someone else's. When there's a photograph and you're in it, who do you look for first? We're wired this way. We're just made this way. And it takes a conscientious effort to let that go. To say, my interests are not as important as yours. My future is not as important as yours. And the first chance that you have to ever learn this is when you have babies. When you have babies. Suddenly you discover, guess what? You're not the center of the universe. The baby that you just had, he's the center of the universe. And here comes the light. Oh, this is beautiful. I saw it in the back. Let there be heat. And that baby will believe that he is the central until they have babies. That's the first chance to get it right. There are other people in this world whose lives are more important than myself. And if I could somehow get out of myself and give myself completely such that I am willing to die in order for that child to live, then I have finally found a reason to live. We have a chance when we have babies. Now, how might we practice this way of dying? Here's a few things, and then we're going to go into communion. One of these is, I believe, we have to make an intentional decision to commit to one thing or one person, one cause, not 4 or 5. Society is telling you right now, keep your options open. I'm telling you, close your options. You have way too many options. You're paralyzed by options. Choose the thing or the place where you want your life to count and go all in on that place and throw to the wind any chance of being something else. But you will have a decision to make. You will have to make that decision. And here's one other thing. You can't make that decision anytime you want. You can only make it when life presents you with options. Then you know you have a decision to make. And when you make that decision, there will always be an incident that follows where there's a conflict of interest, and you'll have to prove it. You'll have to prove that the decision you made, the person that you are truly living for, is in fact the number one cause in your life. You'll have to prove it, because there will be a conflict of interest. If I'm understanding Jesus, he said even the hired hand thinks he's a shepherd. Even the hired hand thinks it's a shepherd until the wolf comes. When the wolf comes, now the real shepherd is self-evident. The real shepherd, said Jesus, dies for the sheep. The hired hand, he thinks he's a shepherd until the wolf comes. Then he's caught between two interests. I want to be a shepherd who puts the sheep first, but I want to live. You can't have them both. Somebody's going to die. So in that moment, you will have to prove that you are in fact committed to the thing you said you were committed to. You'll have to double down. Second thing is self-forgetfulness. You can practice little disciplines that teach you not to worry what other people are thinking about you. So when you go into conversations with people, you can refuse after the conversation to play the videos in your mind and wonder how you looked. What were they thinking when you said? Why did they have that smile on their face? Did they think it was cute, or were they laughing at me? You can make mental decisions inside to say, I'm not going to worry about any of that. The moment is over. I was fully present in the moment, and now that the moment is over, I am free to move on to the next moment. Oh, there is tremendous liberty in that. Now, you'll appear odd to people, because this is a society that teaches you to go on Facebook and find out what people are saying about you. And I'm telling you, turn Facebook off. Live your life and forget what people are saying about you. 5 years ago, somebody said to me, Steve, you're moving around enough right now. You need to watch what people are saying about you. You need to get on Google. Just Google your name and read the comments that people are saying. You'll be smarter when you go on the road. Dumbest thing I ever did. I'll tell you why. And I did it once. I'll tell you why. Because there's a thin line between reading what people say of you and caring. And the moment you read, you almost cannot not care. You get sucked into the vortex of performance. So I'm telling you, live your life to the fullest in whatever moment you are in. Be fully present in that moment. And then when the moment is over, disengage and move to the next moment. Somebody said he was watching Dallas Willard a few years ago before he passed away. John Ortberg said, you were at our church one day. And he said, the image of you walking to your car is stuck in my mind. Ortberg said, most of the time when a preacher is through preaching, he's asking himself, well, how did that go? What are people thinking? Do you think it was positive? Do you think they liked it? But he said, we were walking to the car and you were just singing a hymn. Like you didn't even preach. And when I read it, I thought, that's what I want right there. That's what I want. I want to be fully present in the moment so it gets every ounce of my energy. But when the moment is over, I want to sing a hymn and head to the car. And that starts with not paying attention to Twitter or tweeting everything I do as if the world were my stage. There are little disciplines we can do right now, every day, that practice self-forgetfulness. When I'm talking to someone, I can look them in the eyes, and instead of asking myself, what are they thinking of me? I can force myself to ask, what is it like to be them? What would possess that person to say that to me right now? There's little things. We can do those. Third and last, and I've already hinted at it, we can practice hiddenness. I believe that there are in any person's life a handful of disciplines which lead to that person's power and greatness. Hide those disciplines. Don't let anybody know all that you go through to produce what people admire. You keep that between you and God. That's the covenant that you've made with God. Forget your audience. Forget your bosses. Forget the people that report to you. You report to one in these 5 or 4 disciplines. Do them with a tenacity and with a resilience, but do them in private. Hannah Arendt wrote, a life spent entirely in public, in the presence of others, becomes, as we would say, shallow. While it retains its high visibility, it loses the quality or the depth of rising into sight from some darker ground that must remain hidden if it is not to lose its depth. Mike Cosper wrote of that quote in his book, Recapturing the Wonder, and he noted that Arendt wrote those words in 1958. He said, It was a world that was far less connected than our world, but she saw a trajectory, a tendency toward constant social activity and a demand from the public to be perpetually entertained. And he said Arendt was afraid that this public life would cause the evaporation of not just our privacy, but our individuality. We would no longer exist as a person. And so in 1975, 17 years later, she would have those words tested. It was the year she died. She was awarded the Sonning Award, which is an award given in Denmark to the person who added the most value to European culture in that year. And as is the nature of these awards, they called her in front of a large audience. And this person who was given to quietness and hiddenness found herself suddenly having to explain to an audience the last place she wanted to be. How she was. This is what she said. She said, the word persona originally referred to an actor's mask that covered their individual face. And it indicated to the audience the role or the part that actor was going to play in this scene. But she said in this mask, there existed a broad opening at the place of the mouth, through which the actor, the individual, with a genuine, undisguised voice, could project who they really were. She said that was somehow her fate. She said that society had assigned her a mask, a role, a place in public that she had to perform, and there was nothing wrong with that, she said. But she said, my hope is that I have been able from time to time to project things through the mouth that were genuinely me, that were bigger and deeper than the role that I was playing. Hannah went on to say, when the events for which the mask was designed are over, and I have finished using and abusing my individual right to sound through the mask, things will finally snap back into place. Then I, greatly honored and deeply thankful for this moment, shall finally be free, not only to exchange the roles of the masks in the play, but free to move about through them in my naked thisness. Identifiable, I hope, but not definable, not reducible, and not seduced by the great temptation for recognition, to always be this or play that. In other words, to be what I am not. The masks that we wear, she writes, are always more heroic than the real me. And if we do not practice hiddenness, we will lose touch with that real me. I want nothing more than for the people of God, having died, to find that their influence has been multiplied exponentially by affecting people that they never knew. I believe that is true with many members in our congregation. They don't know it. They wouldn't know it. They're not paying attention to the audience. They do what they do to an audience of one. It's as if they're dead to praise and criticism. They don't listen to either of them. Yet their lives are deep and rich and authentic. And because of their lives, so many of us benefit greatly. I hear in Jesus' words an invitation into that kind of a life. This morning as we come to the table, please think about that. we honor, we commemorate the life, death, and multiplication of one who fell to the ground and died. And by his death produced life for millions of people. And before you step out, I hope you will bother to ask yourself, oh God, what would have happened if he would have chosen to save his life? What then? What for the rest of us? And I hope as you come to the table, you will be profoundly grateful that he did not, and maybe take one step closer to your own death.